episode of the TheoTech podcast. Today I'm going to be interviewing my good friend Shamichael Hallman, who is a pastor, civic leader, and also one of the early leaders of the Code for the Kingdom hackathon movement. We're going to be discussing his new book, Hacked, and how the lessons from the Christian hackathon movement apply to churches and church leaders so that they can engage and activate their members in ways that have never been done before and for the common good. So I think that I met you the first time. It was through Code for the Kingdom, and I think you actually came to one of the live events, and we met in person. Is that right?
Yeah. I can't remember which one, man. It must have been maybe either it was San Francisco or it was the first Seattle event, man.
The first Seattle event. I think that's what it was, because I wasn't
Yeah.
there in the San Francisco one yet.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, and then we did a call afterwards, right, where we talked about Code for the Kingdom and some of the projects
Yep.
that we were doing.
Yep.
So,
We were trying to kind of document, some of the early technologies that were coming out, and trying to highlight the weekends.
so how did you get connected to Code for the Kingdom in the very beginning?
Well, my church staff, my church has a pretty strong relationship with the organization that started it. So I saw an email about 2 weeks before the very first hackathon, and I was like, "Wow, this is pretty interesting." I wasn't new to hackathons. I'd actually gone to a few startup weekends that were like in the South, but I'd never seen one or heard of one that was rooted in a Christian tradition. And so there was a number there. So I called the number, try to find out more information. It happens to be Chris Armas. We talked for probably an hour and a half, and I'm like, you know what? I'm sold, dude. Like I will be there. So I hopped on a plane and went out to the very first one, man. And I've been a part of it in some way, shape, or form ever since then.
Wow, that is pretty cool. So that was a really quick decision on your part.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the moment that I got off the phone with Chris, I was sold, man. I said, I really want to go and check this out. And then when I got to the hackathon, to see elements of prayer and worship and collaboration, I was like, tell me when the next one is. I'll be there, And it was happening. It was a few months later, in Austin, I believe, and I hopped on a mega bus, and it was like a 11-hour journey on a bus to get there. But I mean, it was just as fruitful as the first one.
That's really cool. And so you've been with Code for the Kingdom from the very beginning. You've seen it firsthand from its inception to what it's become today. And as I understand it, you've collected and synthesized all of your experiences and your thoughts about it into a book that you're going to publish very soon.
Yeah. I would try to just write down what I was seeing at each one. Thoughts, ideas that came, any like really cool stories. I would try to just kind of write those down. And probably about a year ago, I started thinking through, just some of the hackathons and some of the people that I'd met. And, one of the things that I saw in a couple of cities was that, the individuals who were coming, as I was having conversations with them, these were people who, even though they were members of a church, for the most part, were not actively or heavily involved in the church. And I was like, wow, that's interesting that a person would come to one of these events, which is 52 hours, and give up an entire weekend after they probably worked, 40 or 50 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something here for the church to learn, because the church struggles, most churches, struggle with, getting and keeping volunteers.
So that was the focus of your book, actually, is helping churches to realize what's actually happening here and how they can apply that to what they do. Would you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's, definitely, one. I think that was definitely one of the main goals. I think, the other goal is to just kind of introduce the church and just maybe even the general population to some of the technology, some of the ideas that, there's some really cool stuff that comes out of Code for the Kingdom. And a lot of times when we think about startup culture, we think about, things that are happening in the secular world, what's the new cool app or the new piece of hardware.
Yep.
And there's some equally as powerful stuff that's coming on the Christian side as well.
Yeah, that's really true. And I was really excited when I read through your book real quick before this podcast, and I got to see the overview. You had a lot of technologies listed there.
Yeah, it's and again, hats off to to Chris, man. with each hackathon, there would be challenges and there would be, themes. And through all of those, man, people would come and come up with stuff, and create stuff. And, the cool thing about it was, the environment and the atmosphere was so inviting that, often it was people who had no tech background at all, who just said, man, the Lord put this in my spirit years ago. And I wonder if there's a way to make it happen. And they came to an event and they pitched it, up in front of everybody, knees shaking and everything. And, some technologists in the back heard them and said, hey, let's make that work, And I think that was one of the special things about Code for the Kingdom, man.
Yeah, totally. What was what are some of your favorite projects that came out of it?
Man, it's been kind of from the beginning to the end. Towards the beginning, there was this guy named Charles Roach who had this app called Scriptive. And, Charles kind of gives this story of going through a really rough moment in his life and, needing to find scriptures that really kind of connected with him. And, each day he would, kind of after work or throughout his day, find scriptures that kind of helped with sadness or anger or grief or depression or even joy and happiness. And he'd write them down and kind of tag them.
Yeah.
And he created this really cool site that, you go to and it kind of asks, what's going on in your life. And, you could say, hey, it was a rough day. I lost my job today. And it was, really unexpected. And there's this next screen that kind of asks you to talk about emotions. What are you feeling right now? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you depressed? And kind of based off of that, it would kick out these scriptures for you, that you could kind of write down and that would kind of resonate with you. And kind of beyond that, there was an option to kind of memorize the scripture. Right. And that was really, really cool. Sometime later, there was a guy who, and I don't know if he ever got it off the ground. There was a guy in Austin who had, this was kind of before the Pokemon Go craze, had created this app called Treasure Hunt. And it was a way to engage children and youth to kind of get them to kind of go throughout the city looking for treasure based off of scriptures and things. And it was really cool, man. People have just come up with some really cool stuff. I think even what you did with Ceaseless, man. The first time that I saw that and the power of, hey, we're on social media all day anyway. The average person is spending hours on social media. The ability, the power to be able to pray for every one of your Facebook friends or your social media friends, there's so much, man. There's so many things, cool things that have come out of it, man. Things that helped with homelessness and fatherlessness and poverty and food deserts, scripture, prayer, so much cool stuff, man. And I've got probably a fraction of them in the book.
It's really exciting. You just feel the energy, the momentum, even as you just described the projects behind all these things. And I can totally relate how I think a lot of pastors probably are wondering how do they tap into this hidden creativity in their congregation, right? How do they unleash all of this amazing action and creativity, intelligence, and ability for the kingdom? I'm sure that even in Seattle, I meet pastors all the time who are wondering that, how do we even engage techies? And they might be thinking about engagement on the most basic levels of just getting them to come to church and visit and say hi. But you're already going to you're shooting for the moon. It's no, it's not about just getting to come to the church. No, they're going to use their gifts to build amazing technology that's going to advance the kingdom, right? That's so exciting.
It is, man. And it's, again, one of the first questions, and I think kind of a grounding question for me was, I was doing some research for the book, and I was looking at the volunteer rates, rates for the last, few years that the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out each year. And, it's just amazing to see that the average person who volunteers, they volunteer 52 hours a year.
Wow.
Code for the Kingdom people are doing that in a weekend.
You're right. Yeah.
Wow. And sometimes multiple times throughout the course of a year,
Yeah.
And so, you just begin to think about, man, what is it about this hackathon? What is it about this movement that, kind of meets people where they are and, puts out this incredible invitation to make some change in the world?
That is an amazing question. Before you answer it, why don't you tell people what is the name of your book actually?
Yeah, so the name of my book is Hacked, and it's just a look at it's really a case study of
Mhm.
Code for the Kingdom. It's kind of how this movement has, and I think is creating new models for how we engage, how churches and pastors and faith leaders kind of engage this group of volunteers. And I kind of struggled with trying to figure out a name,
Uh-huh.
for it, because there were so many different things. And so I said, well, why Hacked? And for me, Hacked was kind of an abbreviated version of the hackathon.
I
And
see.
what I was seeing at the hackathon was all of these really complex and pressing, issues, social issues and spiritual issues, and that were not new problems. I mean, they're age-old problems.
Mhm.
How do you get people to read the scripture more? How do you get people to have an engaging prayer life? How do you deal with poverty in an inner city neighborhood? I mean, those are not new problems.
Mhm.
But what we were seeing was people who were bringing new solutions to the table. And so I thought, hey, I think, within the church, this issue of not enough volunteers or not enough
Mm.
of the right volunteers has been an age-old problem.
Yeah.
How about we try to hack that problem and come up with some new
So
solutions?
that's where the name Hacked came from. Let's
Right,
hack that
right.
problem where we don't have enough people who have the skills, and there's a new way to do that through
Yeah,
this
yeah.
model that you're talking about.
Yep.
So I read through the book, and one of the differences I was really intrigued by was when you talked about asking to versus asking for.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So in the context of that is, I think, where church leaders kind of get not necessarily wrong, but I think a place where we can begin to maybe shift or pivot is, asking people to something as opposed to asking people for something. Asking people for something is an appeal for help.
Mm.
We need someone in the children's ministry, or we need
Mhm.
someone to fix the website.
Yep.
But asking someone to something is an invitation to make an impact, right? And sometimes it's the same topic. It's just you've come at it from a different way, right? So you think about the Kofi Kim hackathons. There was never a, hey guys, we've got this issue over here, come help us. It was always, let me enlighten you on the state of poverty in this city. Let me enlighten you on the state of homelessness in this city.
Mhm.
Um, and let me invite you to something where you can make a very real impact, where you can connect with people
Mhm.
who have similar passions, who have similar skills, maybe even similar thoughts about how to deal with it. And then let's come together collectively and try to tackle this issue.
So that's the big difference, is that you're really calling people to a purpose, not to a task, not to like
Right,
folding bulletins for Sunday, but to how are we going to solve or help people who are experiencing homelessness in our city? Just like the
right,
big
right,
broad
right.
purpose.
And I think even with, say the bulletins, right? I mean, that's something that has to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you need that, but I think it's just, in terms of how do you frame that, right? That bulletin is more than just a bulletin.
Mm.
That bulletin is, the information in that is important. That may be the key to someone discovering a group that they didn't know about. You know what I'm saying? So I think we've got to reframe our opportunities. Sometimes we have to kind of just completely destroy them and come up with new opportunities. But sometimes it's just taking our existing opportunities and just even asking ourselves, man, why would I want to do that?
So
You know, it's,
yeah, I think that's a great question. How would you actually write a volunteer job description for the bulletin role, for example, so that it becomes exciting? What would you do?
yeah. I think you very much kind of approach it as though as how Chris approached challenges. And it's going to vary greatly. With if it's the children's ministry, or it's well, let's start. Let's say it's the youth ministry, right?
Okay.
And you need people to come there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many issues that a teenager faces right now. Online bullying is at an all-time high,
Uh-huh.
right? As kids interact online and social media. I mean, there are the suicide rates, particularly amongst Black young teenagers, is skyrocketing because of the bullying that they're going through, that they're encountering, and they don't really know how to deal with. Or you've got a lot of kids who are kind of into the online gaming sphere, right? And I think the volunteer piece becomes not, hey, come in, it's not so much about snacks or about kind of just being there. It's about finding ways to see where these kids are, to seeing the spaces that they play in, and then finding like really cool ways to go after that, right?
And giving people that freedom to pursue them, to pursue new ideas and new ways of reaching them.
Right. So kind of another thing, and I felt this very strongly since coming through Code for the Kingdom. And it's a scary thing for pastors, I think. But I feel very strongly that if you can find the people in your church, in your congregation, if you can find the people who have similar passions, similar kind of gifts, and you get out of the way, you tell them the problems and get out of the way, they'll find solutions, right? I think a lot of times we want to kind of find the people, give them the solutions, and tell them to work the solutions. And that's not really, that's not as exciting as giving someone an opportunity to find the solution themselves and make it happen. That's scary for pastors because that means that you have to kind of relinquish the control.
Okay. You have to give up some of that power and things go wrong.
You've got to give up some of that power. It may not be as polished, it may not be as tight, but if you find the 5 people in your church or 10 people in your church who are really, really serious about poverty, or really, really serious about marriage, or really, really serious about fatherlessness, and just allow them, whether it's a tech solution or not, just allow them to come up with it. I guarantee you, man, they will figure it out.
So what do you think it becomes the pastor's role in that kind of a world? Because I know with Code for the Kingdom, for example, I'm not a pastor, but I sought out that community and found it within Amazon when I worked there, right?
Yeah.
And so it was something that, I think that people who have that initiative in these different worlds, they can also take that initiative, find one another, and to start working on these causes and problems without, in some ways, the help or the support of the institutional church. And what I'm wondering is, like, what can pastors do? What can churches uniquely do? So instead of just kind of telling volunteers, we want you to come here and to make our website for our church or something like that, how can they actually support believers who are already doing this, or helping connect the ones in their congregations to unleash them towards this? What can they practically do to help that?
Well, I think you just said the word is a connector, right? When I think about what Chris Armas did, he was a connector. It was a connector of problems to people, and people to people who could solve those problems, right? That your role is not so much to find the solutions, but again, find the people who are passionate, right? And I don't know if people are really kind of familiar with what even happens at a typical Code for the Kingdom weekend.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, so they know.
But people arrive on, it's a 52-hour event, starts Friday in the afternoon, 5-6 o'clock, goes to generally Sunday afternoon, right? But people will arrive on there at Friday afternoon. There's a time of kind of socializing before the event actually starts. The event would start with prayer, kind of this overall vision of what Code for the Kingdom is and what it seeks to accomplish. And then there's kind of this time where these challenges are presented, right? And these challenges are everything. We've seen everything. I've already talked about some of them, everything from, spiritual formation. So, scripture reading, prayer, journaling, things such as, kind of pressing world issues with, again, fatherlessness, human trafficking, things of that nature. Also, kind of what's happening in the world with, social media, with smartphones, with feature phones. And so there's kind of time to kind of talk about what's happening in these areas. And people from that point get to kind of self-select. They kind of begin to think about, man, what interests me, right?
Yep.
And then after that, there's a time where people get to pitch, and you know, I mean, if you've ever watched, you know, Shark Tank or anything, you kind of know how these things go. You know, a person gets in front of a crowd and say, you know, I have an idea. You know, I've always wondered if we could create a way to pray for my Facebook friends, or if there was a way for me to, you know, find some like-minded people at my church, right? And you know, out of a group of maybe 100 people or 115, 130 people, you may have 15 or 20 pitches. And then the rest of the group kind of says, hey, I like your idea. Let's make it happen. I like your idea. Let's make it happen. I like your idea. Let's make it happen. And, you know, from about 8:30, 9 o'clock on a Friday until Sunday, man, people work to make that idea happen. And, you know, and some of these people are super tech-minded people who, you know, work at Amazon and Facebook and Google in the daytime, and, you know, are extremely gifted in app development or graphic design. Some of these people are just, you know, just everyday, quote unquote, everyday people, you know, who maybe work at the supermarket, or, you know, who have some profession that's not tech related at all.
Yeah.
And to say, you know, I've always had this idea, you know, I heard my pastor preach this sermon and I wonder how we might be able to solve it from a technology standpoint. And it's really, really amazing, man, to see what happens. You know, there's no mandate given. There's no, you know, really super amount of framework. It's just, hey, you all feel passionate about this. Let's figure out what you can come up with, right? And I think that's the role that pastors have to begin to play. You know, one of the things that was really that was always interesting, still interesting to me as a pastor, man, is there's Sundays where sometimes in like a row, like a pew, like a row of chairs, maybe say 20 chairs, right? Yeah. And there've been Sundays where there'd be a guy who would come up to me sitting on a row and say, you know, hey man, I'm really struggling with, you know, an addiction issue right now, and I just want you to pray for me. I don't want you to tell anybody. I just want you to pray for me, and just, you know, just keep me in your thoughts. And, you know, 15 minutes later, somebody else who's on the same row comes up and says the same thing. Hey man, I got this issue with addiction, and I don't want you to tell anybody. I don't want you to share. I just want you to pray with me. And I'm just thinking, man, if I could link you two together, y'all could encourage each other, man. Y'all could pray for each other, man. But because, you know, there's this kind of isolation in the church, you don't come together. And it's the same thing with talents. It's the same thing sometimes, often with spiritual gifts, you know. And I think shifting to a role of connecting people together, finding the people who have similar passions, similar gifts, similar spiritual giftings, and who have passions about particular things, and just let them go, man.
That's powerful. And do you feel like, I guess, what makes it hard to do that? What makes it hard to change, to kind of reframe the role to become that connector? Or is it just exhausting because, like, you just have too many connections? You got like 20 people coming up to you, and you just can't handle all these relationships.
Yeah, you know, I think that it would be an interesting discussion to have with pastors, man. You know, I think really the thing that I've seen is, I mean, pastors do this anyway. I think most pastors are doing this, you know, in terms of the amount of kind of work that it takes. I think pastors are doing it. They're just not doing it in that way. But I think for what I've discovered, for the most part, is it's just fear. They're just scared that, like, you know, these people are not going to see it through. You know, they're going to do something that doesn't quite line up with, you know, the vision of the church or whatever. And again, I just, and certainly you're more than welcome to think that could be the case. And it may be the case. But what I'm saying is that right now, in most churches, 20 to 30% of the people do all of the work.
Wow.
And some of us have accepted that and just said, you know, hey, it is what it is, and we'll just run the people that we have in the ground.
Yeah.
Some people have tried new things. And I'm saying, hey, if you're looking to try something new, here's some groundwork. Here's a model that may work for you. Here's a way for you to not only engage the people in your church, because I think sometimes when we think about volunteer experiences, we just think about the people in our church.
Yeah.
Here's a way for you to perhaps engage someone outside of your church, so that, you know, and I'll say this and then we can move on, Chris. So many times, people for our church, right? The only time that we communicate with the public is when we have something. Hey, it's Easter service, come to us. It's Thanksgiving or Christmas service, come to us, right? And I think that's led to like a consumerism that exists in a lot of American churches. But I wonder how it may look to say, hey guys, we've got this amazing opportunity for you right now to make an impact in this community, right? So now I'm calling you to something. Whether you're a church member or not, just you, hey, you're within a 3-block radius of our church. We're going to do something that's pretty amazing to shake up this community. We'd love for you to come and hear about it, right? And like, I'm not asking you to join the church. I'm not asking you to give or tithe or anything like that. I just want you just to come and apply some your passion, your skill set to this thing. I think we could see some really cool things happen.
That's really cool, Shamichael. And I definitely felt as a participant myself at Code for the Kingdom, something that was unique about it was that it's a place where you experience people serving one another with their gifts, like nothing else that I really experience. It definitely doesn't feel like that consumerist mindset of like, I come to church, the staff or whoever volunteers do stuff for me, and then I go. Or that, I just have to go and be a volunteer and get burned out and just give my time for free as free labor to do this thing. It's because it's connecting this massive need with my own giftings and passions and other people who are also giving so generously. And then we're doing it all together and we're helping each other out. It's such a different kind of atmosphere. And it just felt like this is what the Bible talks about, love one another, lay down your life for one another, serve one another. It was very different, but feels good. That's what I remember feeling like as a participant.
I mean, even with, and I'm sure you've experienced this, with all of the Code for the Kingdom hackathons, there was generally some type of prize that was out there, right? I mean, it wasn't necessarily the thing, but there was generally a prize out there. But I've gone to, kind of just secular hackathons where the prize was the thing, hey, you're going to get after this weekend for $10,000, and people get in and they're like, hey, I only want the best of the best on my team. If you don't have this skill or that skill, like, just go to that team or whatever. Right. And I think one of the things that I know one of the things that intrigued me so much, particularly when we were in Austin, man, that second Code for the Kingdom hackathon, there were times throughout the weekend where entire teams would just stop what they were doing and go over to another table and say, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, can I help you? Like, is there something? And you would never see that at kind of a traditional hackathon, and I think, to Chris's credit, he was very intentional about kind of creating that atmosphere and making it okay where people could do that, where people weren't necessarily, people were looking for, to win the prize so they could have some money to kind of keep their app going. But just that community and that spirit of collaboration, man, I think our churches would do well to be able to have that happen throughout a weekly basis, man.
Yeah, I think that's exactly kind of applying the Code for the Kingdom model to pastors. It's not coming to a community where they have the answers and like you're just part of like this community that already has it all figured out. It really is like, guys, we're all facing this problem. We're all kind of driven by the urgency of the now. And we never have the ability to think long term, and we don't have a way to minister to these people who have so many gifts, but in our churches they just can't use them. So what if we kind of figure out together what it looks like to create that space for them to use those gifts for the kingdom? And it may not be only inside church on Sunday. It might, it's throughout the week.
Exactly.
But we don't know what the answer is, so we kind of need to get together to figure it out together. Right? A group that did that, something that could probably go a long way, and that would be kind of like the Code for the Kingdom model in the sense that you just kind of let them loose. Here you go.
Absolutely.
Here's the problem. You guys figure out how to solve that.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
One of the things that you mentioned about Code for the Kingdom, you had a couple values that you called out, right? And I can read them out because I have them here. It says one of them is that it's seeing the uniqueness of every person. It's creating opportunities for significance. It's meeting the need for cross-functional, highly collaborative environments. It's giving people opportunities for mentorship. It's community building. It's a passion-driven approach instead of a personality-driven approach. And there's also rewards. Those are the things that I got out of your book. And I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit more about what is it that Code for the Kingdom does that sees the uniqueness of every person, unlike maybe a conventional volunteering role.
Yeah, I go back to the time to pitch, right? That Friday night moment when you've got to get up and pitch, and for most people, stats would say that public speaking is like the most feared thing. That's like the one thing that most people just don't want to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so to get up in front of a group of people and say, hey, I have an idea, it takes a lot. Right. And one of the things that I consistently saw with Code for the Kingdom were people who, in Austin, for instance, it's maybe one of the last hackathons in Austin. Everyone had gone up. Everyone had gone up and gave their pitch, and there were some phenomenal things. And then, Chris came up and he was like, "Man, I just feel like maybe there's someone else here that wants to share the pitch. You're welcome. You can come here. It's okay. We're not going to judge you. Everyone is unique. Everyone, God gave you that idea or that vision. It's okay for you to come up." And there was a lady who came up and she said, I've been writing down, like, for a good part of my life, all the promises of God. And I wonder how it might work to put those in an app so that a person could download the app and read the promises of God. And there were more people who flocked to her to make that thing happen. And within a very short amount of time, like it was one of the apps that actually came to pass. Right. But without that kind of gentle nudge to say, hey, it's okay. It's, we're not gonna, you're just as valuable as the person who works full time at Facebook and can crank out the app. Like, you're just as valuable as that person. And sometimes we don't always have that mentality at church. Right. So that, like, seeing like that, this, regardless of, how much education you have or, how much job experience you have doing a particular thing, like you have a gift, you got a spiritual gift, you've got, something that God's pressed upon you, and like that makes you valuable, right? And I think that's kind of where a lot of the collaboration, what made the collaboration happen at Code for the Kingdom.
And it's also kind of a public gentleness or something that invites
them. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Because they wouldn't maybe normally be the type that would want to promote themselves and put themselves out there, but because they feel safe and they're invited to come forward, their ideas can become real.
Right. Now, so what makes that so much more powerful is the mentorship, right? Because people want to come, people want to be, a lot of like what draws people to volunteer, and this is again going back to that Bureau of Labor Statistics, in terms of when they ask people, well, why do you volunteer? There's a significant amount of people who said, I volunteer because it helps me learn something new. Right. So think about the times, and I'm talking specifically to like the pastors and church leaders right now. Think about the times where you've made that invitation to help someone learn something new, but then you never gave them the freedom to learn it, and you never connected them with people who already knew it. Right. One of the cool things at Code for the Kingdom, at the end of every event, we would do a survey to ask people, what did you like about the event? Right. What should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? And almost without fail, at the top of people's list was mentorship. And so what we would do, and you know this very well, Chris, because oftentimes you've been one of the mentors, right? is approach people, who were experts, subject matter experts, and said, hey, would you be available over the course of this weekend? Would you be available to give 30 minutes of your time to a person, to talk to them, to help them think through their idea, think through their concept, right? And that was so important because, we were the mentor, the caliber of mentors. These were people who were executives. These were people who had founded companies. These are people who had done the work, who these people probably would not have access to in any other way. But I've come and I've pitched an idea that I'm not sure about, but I'm getting this kind of gentle affirmation from the crowd. And I have access to someone who's done this and is willing to kind of walk with me and talk with me through this weekend, and maybe even more if I needed it. That does wonders for people, right? Because now I've learned a new skill. I've got opportunity to kind of practice it, and then I can kind of sharpen it by talking to people who've done it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So for people who are interested in learning more about not only Code for the Kingdom, but how that model can apply to their churches, how can they learn more?
Well, I would definitely encourage you to get the book. By the time this was published, the book will definitely, the ebook will be on Amazon, and I would definitely encourage you to get the book and read through it. I've made the pledge that any profits that I get will go to help additional Code for the Kingdoms, or to help get the word out about this model.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely not trying to get rich or anything off of this.
Can you read the book? Can you read the title of the book and the subtitle one time just for the recording, so that we can also share that? So what's the name? I'll prompt you. All right. Can you tell us the name of the book again, Shamichael?
Sure. So the name of the book is Hacked, Hacked.
And the subtitle is?
The subtitle is, oh, wow. If you hadn't asked me, I could have told you. The subtitle is how a Christian hackathon is challenging the model of engagement in churches.
So if you want to learn more, the name of the book is Hacked, How a Christian Hackathon is Shifting Traditional Engagement Models and Creating an Ecosystem for Life-Transforming Technology. It's by Shamichael Hallman. You can find it on Amazon by November 7th. And all the profits are going to go to funding further Christian hackathons like Code for the Kingdom and spreading the word about this new model, so that pastors and churches and anybody in the body of Christ, and also people who might be interested in these causes, can be activated to use their gifts for good. So The name of the book again is Hacked, How a Christian Hackathon is Shifting Traditional Engagement Models and Creating an Ecosystem for Life-Transforming Technology. Thank you so much. That's going to be the TheoTech podcast for today. If you'd like to hear more stories about how God is working in and through the tech industry and activating people to use their gifts to advance the gospel, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel here. And if you'd like to support us in telling these stories, you can share a story with us, and you can also support us on Patreon here. Thank you so much to Shamichael for joining us, and thank you to all of you listeners, and we look forward to seeing you next time.